This is a brilliant video by Sargon of Akkad about the stochastic terrorism that is currently happening within South Africa. I thought I'd react to it and just provide a little bit more insight. Not that Sargon didn't do a pretty decent job of making his point, but I do find that a lot of people really miss the nuance of what is actually happening in South Africa. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit more of the history, a little bit more of the actual data and the actual discussions when we talk about sort of the situation within South Africa. It's important that you understand all of it because there is so much, and the government of South Africa, the ANC specifically, but pretty much the EFF and the MK as well, they're so involved in this war of image and making sure that they at least optically look good for the world that it can sometimes be very confusing for people. So yeah, please enjoy.
Let's talk about stochastic terrorism. As Wikipedia defines it here, it is a form of political violence instigated by hostile public rhetoric directed at a group or individual. Unlike incitement to terrorism, stochastic terrorism is accomplished with indirect, vague or coded language, which grants the instigator plausible deniability for any associated violence. A key element of stochastic terrorism is the use of media for propagation, where the person carrying out the violence may not have direct connection to any of the users of violent rhetoric, and of course acts of violence and so forth. Now this is relatively narrow, because I think you could define stochastic terrorism as including the expansion of government privilege to certain groups over others, rendering one element to be a second-class citizen. Maybe that you could say that's a kind of prior necessity. But what this means from this...
I think fundamentally, I do agree, although I would say first on the physical definition of stochastic terrorism here, what you need to understand when it comes to the ANC, very specifically, they are an organization that was born really out of Soviet communism. Remember, they were armed by the Soviets, they were trained by the Soviets, and their entire plan, the whole sort of organism and mechanism through which they gained power was all devised by the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, with hindsight being 2020, could really look at the mistakes that they had made and how those mistakes should have played out, what they should have done instead. And so by the time the ANC gets into power, they know exactly how to play these things perfectly. And I would argue that the ANC and the EFF, pretty much all of the children of the ANC, they're masters of stochastic terrorism, specifically plausible deniability. They'll say things in such a way that you can't really pin them down, because at the end of the day, it's all about what people think. It's the optics is super important to them. It's sort of like with every communist state. It doesn't matter if things are actually working, as long as it looks as if it's working. We have this quite heavily in South Africa with a number of things. Like whenever there's a big thing coming up, the ANC will do a lot of work to make it seem like everything is working just fine. Unless they really can't, unless there's no way for them to actually save it. But for the most part, if they have to, they'll really pull out all of the stops. And then, once it's over, they just go back to not functioning or not working, because it's all about what other people think.
This definition is that South Africa is definitely a state in which there is great deal of stochastic terrorism against the white minority. Now, you'll remember Cyril Ramaphosa's land reforms, specifically targeting them. When the government singles out a group and says these people have what they have illegitimately, and we are going to take their land without recompense, what they're saying is those people are no longer really within the protection of the law. And if you have, say, a large movement in the country that is constantly calling for the death of that same people, what this indicates to the wide majority is that this people is no longer within the grace of the law. And so if one group is allowed to chant for the death of another group, and the state then says, yeah, we are going to immiserate that group by taking their property and handing it to the other group without recompense, you can see how the power structures and the rhetoric would lead individuals who are not directly connected to the people taking the actions. You could see how it would lead people to say, you know what, I can just attack them and get away with it.
To be very fair, I don't think Sargon realizes how correct he is on this particular topic. The fact of the matter is, the dehumanization of white people in South Africa has been ongoing for a long time. Now, we don't have sort of language from at least the leaders calling us pests or whatever, but we are referred to, quite honestly, quite often as colonizers, as settlers, and very often there is remarks made. I've discussed this in previous videos. Whenever the ANC meets a failing, something goes wrong, and everyone's going to blame them, they very quickly shift their blame to the white people in South Africa, to apartheid, to the benefactors of apartheid, even though the vast majority of white people alive today did not benefit from apartheid in any way, shape, or form. Yes, they were white, and yes, the system favored white people, but I can tell you from my own family, both my grandfather and my grandmother had to leave school at the age of 12 and 13 respectively, because their parents just physically could not afford to keep them in school anymore. So they had to go work. None of them ever had a formal education. My grandfather worked as a bricklayer for pretty much all of his life, saving up until he could finally afford to buy a very small, tiny little farm, from which he eventually bought multiple farms. But there were no privilege. He wasn't given anything for free. In fact, he couldn't even finish high school. So there's a myth that is sort of pushed in modern day South Africa that every single person that had white skin very much were benefactors of the system, and the government would just give them free stuff, which is not true. There were some benefactors, but very much like it is in the modern system, some were given a lot of benefits, and then most were not. So the idea that everyone should be blamed equally for the benefits of some is truly laughable, and I think very, very dangerous, because as Sargon explained here, and I don't think he's wrong, it does sort of present this idea that, hey, are these people even allowed to be here, right? If the government is saying that they got this land illegitimately, if the government is saying that we should take their land, do they even belong to be here in the first place? And if you go online, if you go on social media, there are a lot of calls from the natives for white people to be removed from South Africa. For white people, well, some will argue permanent removal, which doesn't involve boats or planes. Others will just argue that the rest of the world should take the white people and that they no longer belong here. So you can already see how the language of the ANC has led a very large number of people in South Africa to no longer think of white people as fellow citizens, but rather as a bit of a pest that needs to be gotten rid of.
And this is why the United States accepted 54 white Afrikaners as refugees. And this caused a huge stink. But it's absolutely...
I do think there's more to this. I don't think it's just the fact that, there's oftentimes, almost always in politics, there is such a thing as things can happen that have multiple reasons for its happening. So it doesn't always just have to be this one thing. I do think Donald Trump saw what was happening in South Africa, and we now have, information from even the Security Council in the European Union, from the European Union, who have confirmed that there is definite signs of a genocide happening within South Africa. So you have mounting pieces of evidence now happening about this, and that's definitely one part of it. But I think there's another part, perhaps multiple parts, some parts we're not even seeing. The fact of the matter is that you want to talk about a terrorist state, South Africa is as close to a terrorist state as one can get. During every single thing, when Russia invaded the Ukraine, South Africa was the one nation that absolutely sided with Russia. All throughout it, we tried to feign sort of neutrality. We said, no, we're not getting involved. However, we did war games with Russia. We traded with Russia. We back Russia. We refused to even let Zelensky into the country until, of course, Donald Trump got into power and sort of turned his back on Ukraine. And then suddenly my government was like, oh, Zelensky, come here. We'd love to have you. Right. So there's been so much evidence in South Africa of this nation consistently pulling away from the West, consistently pushing itself into the arms of places like Iran, places like the Middle East, consistently pushing towards China, towards Russia. So you can imagine for someone like Trump looking at South Africa, looking at the benefits that South Africa gets from the United States, and the benefits are many. Someone like Trump is going, why are we giving you these benefits? You don't deserve any of it, because every single opportunity you get, you stab us in the back. And since you won't listen, since you won't learn, we'll just cut you off at the knees. Now, if you want to know why this exactly cuts them off at the knees, you need to understand a little bit about the situation within South Africa. South Africa currently has about 22 to 23 million people on social grants. In other words, the government takes care of them. This is in a population of just under 60 million. The entire tax base of South Africa is between 7 and 8 million, and it is shrinking fast. The overwhelming majority of taxpayers in South Africa are white people. They pay the vast majority of the tax, but about 7 to 8% of the population pays all of the tax in South Africa. I think it's something like 94 or 95% of all of the tax is paid by this group. So Donald Trump, I think, rightly identified, if I take the people from South Africa, the government crumbles. And when the government crumbles, they'll have to either start flying right and doing what we say, or they crumble and we come in and we clean up the ashes. So I do think there's probably more to the story than just wanting to take Afrikaners because they are currently being targeted.
Absolutely true that they are in far greater danger because they are white and because of the racial animus that has been projected not just by the state, but the international community against the white population of South Africa, the farmers of South Africa, because of apartheid, something that ended in the 90s. Yeah. So you can see that 30 plus years later, this has just built and built and built. So you have a country that has affirmative action for the majority, on which the majority are on welfare and the minority have to pay taxes.
Can we just, okay, so he's talking about what I just mentioned, but can we just put this into context? It's not just that you have affirmative action for the majority. You have affirmative action in South Africa. In the sports scene, you have what's called quotas, where every single sport in South Africa has to adhere to a specific quota system. This is sort of invented by the Minister of Sports that will tell you exactly how many black people do you need to have, how many colored people do you need to have, how many white people are you allowed to have. If you don't do all of these things, you can get into some pretty big trouble. You also have quota systems inside companies that want to do business with the government. You have affirmative action in the workplace. You have affirmative action at university. You have affirmative action in schools. You also then have broad-based Black economic empowerment, which is another system of sort of control that allows for the government to basically determine what companies may or may not do business with the government or with companies that do business with the government. Because even if you are just a cleaning crew and you're doing business with a company, this company happens to have government contracts, unless you in your cleaning business is also BEE compliant, you cannot work for this business that is doing business with the government. This goes even deeper than that. The government has their own investment fund. This investment fund is invested in pretty much every single one of the biggest companies in South Africa. And through this investment fund, the government also then gets to tell companies what they can and cannot do. So if any of these companies want to stand up to the government just shuts them down. So there's the government has very, very good control over what you can and cannot do and who you can and cannot hire in South Africa.
To support that. in which the infrastructure is all failing, and there is a democratically elected government.
Well, I would say don't be so quick to say that the infrastructure is failing. I mean, just look at this. My president here explaining, when we have good infrastructure, we are a nation that is connected by rail, road, telecommunication, electricity, education facilities, good health centers, and outstanding entertainment facilities like stadiums. Infrastructure is failing. What are you talking about? My president has a plan. He says when we have good infrastructure, and then just lists a bunch of infrastructure. But, this is the joke in South Africa. This means nothing. This entire post means nothing. If you actually watch the speech, I won't subject you guys to it, but if you actually watch the speech, he doesn't actually go into how to fix this. He just goes into explaining what he hopes and dreams will happen, and the vision that he has for South Africa. This is just how it is in my country. This is how it always has been in my country. But just to show you guys the level of vitriol that is currently happening in South Africa, you have people like this. Just to sort of relay or connect with what Sargon of Akkad is saying. The rhetoric, the constant rhetoric that you have in South Africa have led to people being allowed to say stuff like this. We tried Mandela's way. This is the outcome. Time to explore other options. Now, Mandela's way was, at least publicly, to say he wants peace. He wants reconciliation between whites and blacks. He doesn't want revenge. So when someone's saying we tried this reconciliation thing, now it's time for other options, this is just how comfortable people have gotten with being able to say whatever they want, right? And this is effectively just calling for a final solution.
That is extremely racially coded and has an obvious racial bias against the white minority, in which it allows a very aggressive element of that majority to just chant for the deaths of these people all the time. And then when...
The thing that bothers me about this is when they come back and they say, oh, but it's a struggle song. The overwhelming majority of people who sing this struggle song were not alive when this struggle song, not even Julius Malema, by the way, who is roughly my age. He would have been, maybe 7, 8, 9 years old when apartheid came to a fall. So he would never even have experienced the actual apartheid that he so sings about now. He would have been way too young to remember any of these songs or to grow up with these songs. The people that's filling their stadiums are all young people. The overwhelming majority of EFF support comes from 20 to 30-year-olds. All of them would not have been alive for these songs. So they cannot make the argument that these are cultural songs, right? That they grew up with these songs, because they didn't. If it was just a struggle song from the olden days, why are you still singing it? In South Africa, by the way, there's been attempts by the national government to make things like the old flag illegal at sports events, because people used to go to the stadiums and fly the old South African flag because it was considered to be a hate symbol. You have genuine calls from the majority to change the national anthem, including from Mr. Julius Malema, because our national anthem is made up of two sides. One, which is the new Nkosi Sikeleli, and then the last part is the stem, or I guess the voice would be the sort of direct translation to it. But that's the old national anthem. And there's calls to ban that because that song, according to them, is a hate song because it used to be the song during apartheid. So clearly they understand the concept of, but these songs may be hateful. This flag might be hateful because it comes from that era, except none of those songs or that flag calls for the death of anyone, right? It literally doesn't. It's a prayer to ask God to keep our land safe. Except this isn't, right? This song, Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer, it's a song to kill the Boer and kill the farmer. So how can you even begin to argue that? But it's just our struggle song.
Murders do happen randomly, they're just murders. Who knows why they happen? They're very rarely punished. And so you have, because not just because the state has a bias against these people, but because the state itself is weak. And so
Yeah, just to give a bit of context here. So in 2023, that's 2 years ago, you had 49 farm murders and 296 farm attacks. This is down slightly from 2022, which had 339 attacks and 50 murders. So, make with that what you will. But if you actually go to the incarceration rate, the amount of people that actually get caught, you find that that is quite significantly bad, right? So in the Eastern Cape, for example, you had 3 incidents. This is murders, right? And 3 people were arrested for these murders. In the Free State, 7 incidents, 5 were arrested. In Gauteng, 9 murders, only 1 person was arrested. Only one of the instances led to an actual arrest. KwaZulu-Natal, 4-1. Limpopo, 1-1. Mpumalanga, 7-4. Northern Cape had none. Northwest had 8-1. Western Cape, 5-4. So you can see just how bad the arrest rate is. Not to start to mention that a lot of the time with these arrests, what you'll end up with is someone gets arrested, they post bail, and then they disappear. So there was an arrest, but there's no actual the case never actually comes to fruition. Or what will sometimes happen is very bad handling of evidence, so they don't get convicted. And you even have it here where there's overcrowding, where these people will just be let go after 2 or 3 years, because, of course, they're also not charged under hate laws, right? None of the murders in South Africa where black people murder white people are ever charged as racially motivated. They're just murders. However, the opposite has never been true. If a white person assaults or kills a black person, that is instant hate laws, instant hate violence, or at least hate-filled violence, and that carries a much higher sentence, as well as just, an absolute slew of media attention. So the fact is, there's a 2-tier police system, there's a 2-tier justice system in South Africa, one that exists for white people and one that exists for black people, and no one's allowed to question this, right? There's no way to fight this because the government themselves won't even admit to it.
You have a generally hostile atmosphere in which it becomes understood that these people are really not protected by the same laws that protect others, if those laws even do.
Yeah.
And so when Trump brings Cyril Ramaphosa to the White House and then just plays him the video of Julius Malema chanting, "Kill the boer, kill the farmer," and then presents him with the horrific farm murders. Because again, like the thing about the farm murders, and you should definitely go and watch Lauren Southern's documentary on this, is that this is not just about taking things, right? It's not a burglary gone wrong, where the guy shoots the guy and then loots his house and then runs. These are revenge murders. These are racial revenge murders.
I would say
that are done.
I would say oftentimes stuff is taken, but it's the violence that goes with the murder that really is the giveaway, that there's something bigger going on. The violence is oftentimes off the charts. Guys, I highly recommend that you do go watch Lauren Southern's movie on this. There's another girl who just did a video also investigating these farm murders. It's this video here by Angela Rose. I investigated the South African chaos. This is 3 days ago. You can go watch this video as well, which is also just absolutely harrowing. But it's the violence that these murders involve. It's not just walking in and shooting. It's not just walking in and cutting their throats. It's always torture. It's always graping and just some of the most vile stuff you'll ever encounter. The kind of stuff that will make most normal people's stomachs churn. This is the scenes of these farm murders. This is what you walk into when you see these murders. I know because I have family members who have been on these crime scenes minutes after they happened. And you have it to the point where sometimes even the first responders will leave sickened by what they're seeing, right? That's how brutal some of these farm murders are. And people want to say, oh, it's just murder. It's nothing bad. Well, then explain the torture. Explain the violence that goes with these murders if it really was just a bit of theft.
in the most horrific ways, like the most just inhuman forms of torture. I read about these a few years ago, and I was just like, Jesus Christ. I wouldn't even want you to go through them, but you can go and look up just details of South African farm murders, and they're just horrible. They're just genuinely horrific.
Yep.
And so when you've got someone like Julius Malema, with his million-strong party chanting "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," and "Shoot to kill," and things like this, it becomes rather indefensible. I mean, what is the argument against? Well, the argument is, oh no, they just want to have a nuanced discussion about land reform. Bollocks, do they?
Yeah.
What Malema says, straightforwardly, is that they want to kill the white minority of South Africa.
True.
That's quite clear. And so when Trump says, look, this is a genocide, well, yeah, it looks like... I mean, I'm not going to say that Ramaphosa is engaged in a genocide. No, he is...
I wouldn't be so quick to say that Ramaphosa isn't engaged in this. Guys, there's so much that it makes it very difficult to know what is actually going on because of how incredibly secretive the ANC actually is, because of their training, because of their background. Let's just put it this way. I would not be surprised if it came out that MK, EFF, and ANC are still the same party. The ANC just had to spin off this new party because they couldn't be seen in the public eye being that extreme. Not to mention the fact that there's been calls within the ANC for Julius Malema to return. You know, some people within the ANC don't mind Julius Malema and his rhetoric. Not to mention the fact that the ANC themselves has never actually condemned the singing of "Kill the Poor, Kill the Farmer." They sort of just said, we stand by what the Constitutional Court said. It should be mentioned, it wasn't the ANC that took Julius Malema to the Constitutional Court to get him to stop singing the song. It was AfriForum and I believe at the time Freedom Front Plus that did that. And the Constitutional Court, all the way back in 2003, said, stop singing that song. It's hate speech. And then, a few years later, now suddenly the Constitutional Court's like, we don't know what you're talking about. This is just the struggle song. It's perfectly fine. He can sing it. And now the ANC is just like, well, we just stand by what the courts do because we're all for law and order.
Just engaged in a stochastic terrorist state that basically reveals itself in the actions that it takes. Like, for example, like Malema, like Trump asked this, why isn't he in jail? Right? Going on stage and calling for people to be killed is not appropriate in any democratic state, right? And I shouldn't have to say that, but it's straightforwardly unacceptable. Malema should be in jail, right? A very long jail sentence.
I can guarantee you, if it was a white man singing the same thing about black people, he would be in jail. No questions asked. There wouldn't even be questions about that.
Sentence. We're calling for this. And then when he's released, we're like, look, go and call for it and we'll send you back to jail. Because that's what a state that understood the white population of South Africa to have the protections of the law would do. It would be right to lock him up.
Yeah.
But he doesn't. And Malema has a party 1 million strong and like 30 seats or 39 seats in the assembly or whatever it is. And so he's just allowed to carry on calling for the deaths.
I think the thing that people need to remember is Malema currently sits on about between 10 and 12% of the South African population. You need just over 5% of a population in order to commit full-scale genocide. It has never been true that 50, 60, 70% of a population rises up and kills everyone else. The overwhelming majority of people in a society will not engage in violence. They'll just go along with whatever is being said, right? Just to keep the peace. Most coups d'etats, most civil wars, almost all very, very violent militant action within countries happen with very small groups, 5 to 10% of the population. And Malema having 10% and the MK party having about 10%, together they have 20% of the total vote in South Africa, which makes them a formidable force. And the MK is just as racist as the EFF. It makes them very, very sort of scary, and you should technically. Now, I'm personally all for free speech, and I think you should be able to say whatever you want, quite frankly. However, in South Africa, that's not true. South Africa has some of the most extreme race laws in the world. We do absolutely not allow for racism under our free speech, and you can go to jail or be fined tens of thousands of rands if you do engage in racist speech, except, of course, if you're black, in which case you can say whatever you want.
Of the white South Africans. And so people inspired by this, though not directly connected to him, decide, yeah, no, I can just go and... I've nursed a racial grievance against the whites for long enough that a bunch of us can just get together and go and murder and rape and torture some of them on a farm, and
sounds good.
Probably nothing will happen to us because nothing's happening to this guy. And so we're just going to go and do it. And so this isn't about land reform, and nobody thinks that it is. And even if it was, Ramaphosa going and just stealing people's land without compensation, that's hardly the right way to go about it anyway.
No.
So anyway, for some reason, we accept Julius Malema into our country. I don't know why we're allowing him in. But of course, Renaud Camus, he's not allowed in because you can see which one is on the progressive scale where they lie. It is good.
What the UK doesn't get is Malema hates you. Guys, I want you, if you're from America or from Europe, I want you to understand something. The average black voter in South Africa, for the ANC, for the EFF, for the MK, it's not that they mildly dislike, they hate you. They hate you. They want your money. They want your gifts, your goodies. They don't want you. They don't want you at all. They view you as oppressors, as evil. They gladly kill you. They gladly see China conquer America, Russia conquer Europe. They would chant and celebrate that. So when you guys let these people into your countries, you have to understand they are not there because they like you or because they care about you. They're only there to spin you a sob story or sometimes just to straight up lie to your face in order to get money from you, because that's all that really matters to them is getting money.
To be not an ethnic minority, good to be black and calling for the deaths of white, that's perfectly fine. You can come into Britain. Mm-hmm. If you are a white man and you're saying, hey, maybe we shouldn't be just giving our countries away to everyone else in the world, well, you're refused.
Well, imagine.
Absolutely fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point being is that even Elon Musk's own father has had to personally defend his property in South Africa to, as he says, stop them from, quote, cutting my daughter's head off and boiling it. Because, again, this, you just don't realize the depth of hatred that goes on in these murders. And you think
I really don't want to go into this because it is actually upsetting, but I know of a murder that happened where the father was tied up. He had to watch as they assaulted and raped his 5 or 6-year-old daughter, ultimately left her for dead, and she did die. They drowned his little boy. I think his boy was like 8, maybe 9. They drowned him in boiling water. Not just drowned him in boiling water. So I ask you, what about that is normal? Right? What about that screams just, oh, we're just here to take your shit and we're just going to kill you so you can't identify us. But we're going to go to extra lengths to ensure that you really suffer before you die. Right? And they ended up trying to kill him as well. I think he survived, if I'm not mistaken, but with lots and lots of wounds.
Stoked by people like this. Like, this guy is a national figure. Like, he's got 39 people in the parliament. He's got 1 million people in his party.
Yeah, and they're rapidly following. He has
stadiums full of people chanting, kill the farmer, kill the boa. And unsurprisingly, that means the farmers have to defend themselves against a radicalized segment of the black population in South Africa. Like, this is crazy and should be prevented. So full props to Trump for calling this out. I mean, like, this is completely unacceptable, right?
Yep.
I mean, it shouldn't have to be said. It's completely unacceptable, but it obviously is. And so people are like, well, okay, well, you know, it's not disproportionate. It's just that South Africa has a high murder rate. It's like, no, it is disproportionate. As PBS here have tried to defend this. White farmers have been murdered in South Africa. Again, it's not like they were just shot in a drive-by by accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
A group of men, black men, go to a house, break in, kill, torture, rape, and do atrocious things for hours to their victims, right?
Yeah.
These are not just, it was just a murder. It was just someone in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? But they say, but those murders account for less than 1% of the more than 27,000 annual murders nationwide. Okay, but let's adjust that for population, shall we? As this chap's doing here. White farmers are 44,000 people in South Africa, or 0.066% of the population, so they're being murdered at 1,500% their population.
Yeah, 1,500% more. The argument is always that, it isn't disproportionately targeting white people because look at all these murders that we have. What most people don't realize is there's a ton of murder in South Africa. That's very true. We have, for example, gang areas where not even the police wants to go into, where gang killings is an everyday occurrence. You also have a lot of murder of just fights breaking out in shebeens or bars, local bars, where they'll get drunk and they'll kill each other, stab each other. You know, that stuff does happen, and it happens a lot in South Africa. You have a lot of domestic violence where husbands will kill their wives or beat them to a pulp, whatever the case might be, right? There's a lot of that. No one is dismissing that. However, there is a big difference when you get to the compared to population size numbers. Once you look at murders and how it affects the different populations, and specifically murder from one population to the other. So in other words, the majority specifically killing the minority and the minority killing the majority, you'll see that it is disproportionately weighted towards the one side. There are far fewer white people murdering black people than what there are black people murdering white people. And as I already explained, if you're a white guy doing anything to black people, you will be charged under hate-filled violence, right? So it's hate-fueled, therefore it's a hate attack or a hate crime, and therefore you'll be punished much, much harsher. Whereas the opposite is never true. So it is important to keep in mind that currently being a white farmer in South Africa is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. Not just in South Africa, in the world. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's more dangerous to be a white farmer in South Africa than what it is to be a police officer in New York City. That's how dangerous it is to be a white farmer in South Africa. So please don't come at this, but look at all these murders. Yeah, there's a major difference between people murdering each other and people murdering other people that doesn't look like them. And these murders very much look like they're hate crimes.
How is this not a form of racial violence? And so experts can say the deaths do not amount to a genocide.
I hate when they say, but the death number isn't a genocide. Genocides can only be called after the fact. You can only call a murderous spree a genocide after the fact. Genocides don't happen overnight. They have a build-up. South Africa currently sort of adheres to 6 or 7 of the 10 key traits of what a genocide would be according to Genocide Watch. The last 2 is extermination and denial. Right? Those are the last 2. Extermination and denial. So in other words, what the world is saying is, hey, until we get to extermination, we're not talking about this. It's like, well, okay, but all of the others are already happening. Right? All of the others are already happening.
But I'm sorry, like, you can't pretend that this isn't the case in South Africa. We can all see it from the outside, right? We can all see it. We know how to characterize this as well.
We can see it from the inside as well.
What this is stochastic terrorism that is designed to simply immiserate the white population. And if one of the large parties, one of the major parties in South Africa has got anything to do with it, it will turn into a genocide, won't it?
Yeah.
And so you can't say that this isn't genocidal rhetoric. It's crazy. And I find it very interesting as well, the population growth of the black population in South Africa. Because remember, the Bantus are not native to South Africa, they're native to Central Africa. And so a lot of them have just migrated there. And you can see that the population growth, this is not a natural population growth, right? This is because of mass immigration to South Africa from other areas of Africa. And ironically, the EFF are even against this now. In 2022, Malema was like, yeah, hang on a second. Why are there so many people from Zimbabwe here or from wherever here? We need to get these people out too. Okay. Fair enough. The Pan-Africanism gets dropped.
It should be mentioned that one of the reasons is a lot of Zimbabwean people aren't necessarily white people, but they don't have bad intentions towards farmers and the like, because they lived through their own little experiment with chasing out farmers. And so they don't really want to go back to it. I've had conversations with people from Zimbabwe that literally said, what you guys are playing here, I've lived through it. I don't want to go back there. So I'm really hoping that it doesn't happen.
But the point is, this is entirely racial, right? This is entirely a way of trying to essentially drive the white people out of South Africa. And it's working.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the emigration statistics, it's millions have left, and this only goes up to 2015. And because
it's increased since 2015, white people are leaving by the day, getting out of South Africa.
Of the terror. This is a form of terrorism, and it's designed to ethnically cleanse the white population of South Africa. Now, you can ask yourself, well, what will that do to South Africa? And the answer is probably nothing good, right? No. It's probably not going to materially improve as a country if that's done. So why is this being allowed? Well, great question. Why is this being allowed? Why is he not in jail for his rhetoric? He is inciting violence.
I can tell you why he isn't in jail, because the ANC agrees with him. The ANC just doesn't have the balls to do it themselves because they know that will sink the country. But they absolutely agree with his rhetoric. My question is more, why is the rest of the world not punishing South Africa for this? And I realize saying this, I'm in danger of being arrested for treason, because apparently that's now a thing. But yeah, why are the rest of the world not saying anything? Instead, you have Europe basically saying Trump's a liar, and they don't agree with Trump. So it's kind of wild.
Inciting murder. We know that this is the case. Why is Ramaphosa not doing something about this? And the answer has to be, he's worried about his electoral prospects. He's worried that this is I guess you could say this is to his right, even though really it's to his left. But anyway, from a sort of African nationalist perspective, Malema operates far to his right, and I would imagine that he's afraid of losing voters to him. And so his precarious position becomes one of, well, I have to basically permit this guy calling for the murder of white farmers, because otherwise I lose my position as the president of South Africa. Okay, great. That's brilliant, isn't it? And I'm sure nothing bad will happen to the country as a result of this.
Fundamentally, the ANC has already started moving even further to the left, even more extreme. And I think that's just going to continuously happening. I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. But hey, it is what it is. Please hit the like if you like, dislike if you didn't. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this mess that currently is ongoing in South Africa. I'd love to read your thoughts. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I'll see all of you in the next one. Peace.